It's finally time. F1 is almost back. Testing starts next week, so I thought it was time for me to share with you my constructors and drivers championship predictions for the 2025 F1 season. I'm going to get started with some more specific categories that I have laid out, and then we will get into the championships. The first category I have is the most impressive rookie. I am putting Ollie Behrman as my most impressive rookie. I'm going with Ollie Behrman for a few reasons. I think that he is maybe the most prepared for the season, barring Liam Lawson. Obviously, Liam Lawson has had experience driving the V-Carbs. I think they're called Racing Bulls now. I can't keep up. The Racing Bulls, he's had experience driving the Racing Bulls. He's also been a development driver, so I'm confident that he's had experience developing the Red Bull for 2025. So I think he will be pretty comfortable. But I think Ollie is going to end up looking more impressive. I think Ollie probably also has a lot of experience. He's been with Ferrari. He's been a reserve driver. He's done very well in the races he has done. It's probably more pressure on Liam Lawson than there would be on Ollie Behrman from that perspective. I think Liam Lawson kind of has to keep fighting for his seat, as there's Isaac Hadjar, there's Arvid Lindblad coming up as well. And so I think Liam Lawson has to prove himself more than Ollie Behrman. Ferrari is very confident in Ollie Behrman, and I am as well. Ollie Behrman will be promoted to Ferrari when the time is right, when Lewis Hamilton retires, so there's not as much pressure on him imminently. I also think that Ollie Behrman I think the Haas spoiler will be pretty decent. I think it will be good enough that it will allow Ollie Behrman to capitalize on any opportunities there are and for him to show off his skills, but I don't think it'll be so good that the credit goes to the car and not him. I think the Red Bull might be not great this season, and so I think that Liam Lawson will do fine. He'll do pretty good, better than the other Red Bull partners we've had recently beside Max Verstappen. But I think when you're in a Red Bull, there's automatically a higher expectation that's just going to be harder for Liam Lawson to succeed in the eyes of everybody. His competition otherwise is Jack Doohan. I want Jack to do so well. I've said this before, I think he's being set up for failure. I think he'll get dropped mid-season. I don't want that to happen, but I think it will. And then Gabriel Bortoleto. I think people are underestimating him. He won F3 and F2 back-to-back. Same with Oscar Piastri, same with Charles Leclerc. This is people who do that are very successful. But the Sauber, I don't think, is going to allow him to look very impressive. And then I think Kimi Antonelli, it's sort of the same situation with him and Gabriel Bortoleto. I think they're really preparing for 2026. This year is just a year about getting comfortable. So when the new regs come in 2026, they'll really be able to show off their skills then. My next category is biggest flop, and I'm going with Sauber. As I mentioned, there's new regs coming in 2026, which will shake things up a lot. There will be very substantial differences. Sauber is also turning into Audi in 2026. I think a lot of the focus is on 2026. I think Audi would rather have the development time that comes with finishing lower in the Constructors' Championship than any money that would come from finishing higher in the Constructors' Championship. So I think for that reason, they'd rather do a little worse. I think they'd rather spend all their resources and time and energy on 2026 and 2025. Also, the Sauber was horrendous last year. I don't have faith that they'd be able to turn it around that substantially or that they'd want to. Again, I think their focus is on 2026 and this is kind of just a season that they got to finish out. My next category is closest teammate pairing. I am going with McLaren. They were probably around the closest teammate pairing last year as well in 2024. Maybe not necessarily by points, but I felt they were pretty on par with each other. I kind of expect the same going into 2025. The concern is that there will in the end be a rift, but I think there's only going to be a rift between them if they're both very competitive and fighting close to each other. I also think a lot of the other teams now have pretty clear 1 and 2 drivers, so a lot of the rookies coming in, I think, will, once they are comfortable, start to get priority. And because this is a comfortable driver pairing for McLaren, they've both been there before. Most teams have changes. I just think they're going to be a bit closer than everyone else. My furthest teammate pairing, this is the teammate pairing that I think is going to be the most different. They're going to have the biggest points difference. They're going to have the biggest difference in performance. I am going with Red Bull. I just can't ever bet against Max Verstappen. I think Max Verstappen is a crazy, insane, talented driver. He can do things with the car that he shouldn't be able to do. And Liam Lawson, who's to say he won't get there? I mean, I think Max is a generational, so most people won't be as good as him. The vast majority of people won't be as good as him. But I think especially coming into his first year at Red Bull, I think Liam Lawson is going to fall behind a bit. There's also the notorious struggle with Red Bull that we've seen, especially in recent years. It's just hard for anybody but Max Verstappen to drive that car and to get the most out of that car. And so I don't see why Liam Lawson would be any different in his first season. And even though I did mention that a lot of the teams now have clear 1 and 2s, those are 1 and 2s because it is a rookie and because it is a experienced driver. The experienced driver is there for a reason, because they are talented and because they're going to be able to help the team develop the car for 2026. So they're not bad drivers. I don't think they're going to be huge differences. I just think McLaren's going to be a bit closer. All right, those are all of my random little categories. We are now going to get into the Constructors and Drivers' Championships. I will be doing them simultaneously. You'll see how I sort it out. I actually had a little bit of trouble with this. I think a lot of teams are going to be very close. And I had to keep in mind that 2026 is going to be a new regulations year. So teams will be strategizing that. Some teams will want to be still going all out, trying to finish as high as they can in the Constructors Championship to get as much prize money as they can to use into developing the car. Some teams will be not so focused on that and will start shifting development even sooner because that's just what they want to focus on, and they don't really mind finishing lower in the championship because they would get more development time. But then there's also the thing of, if you start competing very well, you're going to want to keep developing to finish out the season strong, to improve, especially in the top few teams and drivers fighting for championships. Okay, starting with P20, I have Jack Doohan. As I have said, I don't want this to be the case. I simply fear that he will be dropped. Franco Colapinto is there. I don't think he's being set up for success. I think he'll probably get dropped in the first half of the season if he does, and he's just not going to have much of any points. In P19, I have Nico Hülkenberg. I have him here because I think, like I said, I think the Sauber is going to be bad this year. I think the focus is going to be on developing for 2026, and I think a lot of Nico's time might be spent on that specifically. I think Nico is there to really steer the ship forward and to have a reliable driver there to help guide Bortoleto. And because Bortoleto is a new driver, he's not going to be able to have enough insight into how the 2026 car should be developed. And so for that reason, I think Nico might be getting more of the upgrades. He might be doing a bit more of the testing things, which could also push him further back. I also rate Gabriel Bortoleto really highly, so for that reason, I have Gabriel Bortoleto in P18. I think he will finish higher than Nico Hülkenberg over the course of the season. I think he might take some time to get up to speed, to get super comfortable, but I do think that he's going to be more likely to be up front and to benefit when something crazy goes on in the top 10, and he's going to be more likely to snatch those few points here and there when they can get them. Again, this ranking is not, PA19 and P18 is not not considering how talented they are of a driver. It's more of a thought of where I think the Sauber is going to be. For that, I am putting Sauber in P10 in the Constructors Championship. I just don't have high expectations. In P17, I have Isaac Hadjar. I'm mixed on him. I think he can be a very talented driver, but I fear he is a bit too hot-headed, which is something that Red Bull likes, and I've talked about this before. If you channel that correctly, you end up with a Max Verstappen. If you don't, you end up with a driver that is crashing a lot. And I'm not sure where it's going to go. I also think Isaac has a lot of pressure on him because Arvid Lindblad now has his super license. He can race in the he can race in the Racing Bull. I also don't think the Racing Bull would be a great car. I'm just not feeling that this is necessarily a recipe for success in all areas. In P16, I have Alex Albon. I think the Williams is very focused on 2026. I actually think Williams are in kind of a funny position. I don't think they're concerned about money in the sense that they would rather have less development time and score higher in the Constructors Championship. I think to get more money, I think they'd rather the development time, so they don't mind finishing lower, especially because they have that new title sponsor that's probably bringing in a decent chunk of money, so they'd rather put their attention on development than the money that they would need for development. I also think that both drivers, Alex and Carlos, are going to be driving pretty conservatively considering all of the crashes that happened in 2024. I don't think Williams is going to be wanting to spend any of their money on fixing those crashes like they had to in 2024. And so I don't think they're going to be fighting. I think Williams is really conserving their energy. This is really a season of just finishing to really have a go in 2026. So for that, I have Alex Albon P16. I have Carlos Sainz in P15. I do think Carlos Sainz will finish ahead of Alex Albon. I rate them both very highly. I just think Carlos has a bit more, I want to say he has more experience, especially at the front, but that's not necessarily, it's different because now it's going to be towards the back. I just think Carlos is going to do it over the course of the season. I think Carlos will outperform Alex Albon. I'm biased because I'm a Carlos fan, but that's just my feeling. With that, I have the Williams in P9 of the Constructors Championship. Again, I just really think this season is about just getting through it. I don't think they're going to be pushing too hard in all aspects for 2025. In P14, I have Lance Stroll. Not impressed, and I feel bad to say that because I'm Canadian and I want to really support Lance Stroll, but I think it's over. I think that Yuki should get that seat in 2026, to be honest. I'm not impressed with Lance. He's a consistent driver. He doesn't have horrendous races very often. Sometimes he has pretty good races when the conditions are right, but it's just not frequent enough. And I also don't think that Aston Martin's going to be very good. Again, I think they're kind of in a tough position because they tried to get somewhere in 2023. Didn't happen. Adrian Newey is coming in a few months. But again, I think a lot of that attention is going to go into 2026, especially with the new Honda engine that they will be doing. I think it's just about getting through this year. And again, I'm like, Lance is very meh. In P13, I have Yuki Tsunoda. I can't tell if I'm rating him too highly in this. This is coming out of respect for Yuki as a driver. I can't tell how the racing bull is going to be. I think it's going to be about on par with last year. And Yuki Tsunoda finished in P13 last year. So that's kind of where this is coming from. He's a very well-equipped driver. He's always just on the cusp of points, and so if something goes wrong, he's always there to capitalize, which is why I have him here. I think he's usually more well-equipped to benefit from those situations than like a Lance Stroll is. And again, I just don't expect the car to be phenomenal. Of course, I have him above his teammate, who right now is Isaac Hadjar. I also think he has something to fight for in trying to get that Aston Martin seat in the future with the Honda connection. And so there's going to be motivation for him. So even if the car is not great, he's going to be fighting just a little bit more while still being comfortable enough to really be able to perform. In P12, I have Esteban Ocon. I think that Haas is improving. They've very much impressed me at the end of the 2024 season. I also think Esteban Ocon is a very good driver, and he will be able to be in the hopefully more positive experience than he has been previously and have a decent car, and he'll be able to like make use of that. However, I do have Ollie Behrman ahead of him in P11. I rate Behrman very highly, and again, I think he's comfortable enough where he is, but he still has more drive to move forward to the Ferrari. Perhaps he has more of a drive than Esteban Ocon would. I don't see much more forward advancement for Esteban Ocon. I think he's hit his peak, and unless something crazy happened, I don't think he would break into some of the top teams. Ollie Behrman is being set up for that, so he has something to be hungry for, while still being comfortable enough where he is to be amazing, like I said he would be, as best rookie. Again, Ollie Behrman has some experience with the Haas, doing some of the FP1 sessions and just being part of the Ferrari reserve driver program. So for that reason, I'm putting him ahead of Esteban Ocon, and I'm putting Haas in P5 of the Constructors Championship. I think that they're in a good position to improve. I just don't think they'll catch up to the top teams. P10, I have Fernando Alonso. I don't have much to say about this. I don't think that Aston Martin will be great. I think Fernando is a very good driver past his peak, and I think he will be kind of conserving his energy for 2026, where he'll probably have his final go and put all of his energy there. With that, Aston Martin is P7 in the Constructors Championship. Again, I think they're focusing on 2026. And I don't see where there's room for them to improve. It seems that they're kind of lost, and I don't see how that would get fixed, or why they'd even want to push fixing that issue with these regulations when they're about to change. In P9, I have Pierre Gasly. And the Alpine has been very impressive at the end of the last season, and Pierre Gasly is a very good driver. When he has a car that works for him, he can do it. And so I think he actually might get a few podiums. I think he will be around the points pretty frequently. I am, of course, putting him higher than Jack Doohan because he is more experienced, he's more comfortable, and I'm also much more confident that Pierre Gasly will be finishing out the season than Jack Doohan will be. I also feel that Alpine will want to continue developing the car throughout the season. simply for the fact that I still feel like they're kind of on the edge of a sale. I think they're going to be wanting to look as good as they can moving forward. They're also going to be taking, was it the Mercedes engines in 2026? So that's going to take a load off of them. There's a lot less for them to develop going forward. And so I think that they'll be putting more of their energy into the present. With that, I have Alpine in P6 of the Constructors Championship. I think they're going to edge out Aston Martin. They feel more competitive to me, which is not something I thought I would say at the start of last season. So we'll see where things go. I could be completely wrong, but I'm feeling good about them. Now in P8, I have Kimi Antonelli. I do not expect much of Kimi Antonelli in this season. I think your first season going into a Mercedes, a very temperamental Mercedes at that, I think is a big ask. And I think that they've done that pretty much obviously to prepare him for 2026. It doesn't make sense for him to go anywhere else. Lewis Hamilton was leaving. Of course, it was going to go to him. But I think this is really just a year for him to get used to being in F1. I don't think this is going to be a year for him to really perform. Again, I think that will come in the future. I also feel he might be a bit crashy, given that crash he had at Monza. I don't know. I think he'll get there eventually. He's going to have to find the balance between really pushing and going overboard. In P7, I have Liam Lawson. I have Liam above Kimi Antonelli because he does have more experience. And I think the Red Bull is going to be more consistent than the Mercedes. And so it'll be easier for Liam to be consistent himself. I think he'll do fine. I don't expect him to be amazing this first season. And of course, like if your teammate is Max Verstappen, you're never going to look like an amazing driver beside him. He does also have some pressure pushing up on him. I don't think he'll be changed out this season. I think he'll complete the whole season in the Red Bull. But who's to say that that won't change in 2026 or 2027? Now in P6, I have George Russell. George is a great driver. I rate him very highly. I just don't think the Mercedes will be great. I think given 2024, the Mercedes was very temperamental. It was amazing when all the conditions were correct and really difficult to drive when it wasn't. I think that will be improved. And I think George will be able to really capitalize on the Mercedes when it is good. I expect him to win a few races at least. I just don't think it will be consistent enough. So with that, I have George Russell finishing ahead of Kimi Antonelli. Obviously, I think George Russell is very good, and I think Kimi Antonelli is going to need the season to be comfortable. 2026 might be a different story. I also have Mercedes in P4 of the Constructors Championship. I think that they will win races when possible with George specifically. I just don't think it will be... I mean, they went from having Lewis and George to George and Kimi Antonelli. Like, that is undoubtedly a step down for now. And I just don't see them being as consistent as any of the other top teams. Okay, P5, I have Lewis Hamilton. It was hard for me to predict this, and I also think I previously predicted that Lewis will finish ahead of Charles. I take that back. I don't know, something is telling me that Lewis is going to need a second. I think 2026 he will be more comfortable. I mean, he signed for 2 years for a reason, and he signed on through 2026 for a reason. But I think he sees that Ferrari are well positioned for the new regulations. At least I hope. I'm a Ferrari fan. Ferrari don't seem to be concerned about having Charles and Lewis Hamilton competing for a championship, because we know that's what it's, but they both want to be drivers' champions. I think that Ferrari has a bit of an agreement. I think that, well, they will see whoever is performing better, of course, but I think that I think the focus might be on Lewis in 2026 and Charles now. We'll see how it plays out. That's just my feeling. I do think he will win a couple of races though, for sure, especially towards the end of the season, yeah. And I think that Ferrari is very well positioned this year. From P5 on, I expect things to be very close, like including Lewis Hamilton in that. So these could be very interchangeable. P4, I have Lando Norris. Yeah, I have Oscar Piastri in P3, so obviously I have Oscar finishing ahead of Lando. I think Lando he has some room to improve pure driving skills, but Oscar has much more, given his lack of experience compared to Lando especially. And they were already pretty close in 2024, especially by the end of the season. I think that Oscar has a bit harsher of a mentality. I think he is a bit fiercer Then Lando, of course, that could change. Lando hasn't had much room at the top being prepared, and then all of a sudden he was thrown into it. I just think Lando might be a bit too kind. We've already seen Lando especially be very guilt-tripped by team orders. I don't know if Oscar will be as impacted by that. I think I'm just have a vibe that it might be easier for him to say like fuck it and just do it anyways, especially with Mark Webber as his manager. I think Mark Webber has strong feelings about team orders. I don't know, this could really go either way. I think if Lando steps up mentally, he can absolutely do it, and I have faith he can do that. But mental things are very hard to control and really very hard to push through, and I just don't see Oscar having as much of a difficulty with that, and so that's where this comes from. I also have McLaren in P2 in the Constructors Championship. We're kind of going a little bit out of order here. I think they'll have a very great car. I think they'll continue to improve upon last year. But it's been a while since they were close to the top. They haven't been as competitive as the Ferrari and the Red Bull, who I predict to be on either end of them. You'll see where. Moving on to P2, I have Max Verstappen. Now, honestly, part of me feels like I should have him lower. I just am still traumatized, and I don't feel good betting against Max Verstappen ever. I also think Max Verstappen is crazy. This is going to be very Red Bull dependent. I think that just the fact that he won the championship last year says a lot about him, especially that he was winning races towards the end of the season. I don't know. Like, is the Red Bull too far gone that they're not able to bring it back to a drivable condition, and it's Max just really powering through, and they might just focus on 2026 to try to build a more stable car? I don't know. We'll have to see. My sister also brought this up, the fact that he has his baby coming, so maybe he's gonna be a bit more distracted. I don't know. I just can't bet against Max Verstappen, even though it feels wrong. I'm not predicting him P1. With that, I have the Red Bull in P3. I think the McLaren and the Ferraris will be more competitive cars. I also think both teammates will be more competitive, given I have the teammates much closer than him and Liam Lawson, especially given that they finished P3 in 2024 and Sergio Perez was nowhere. That season hardly contributed. I think Liam Lawson will do better, and I think that Max is Max, and you can't bet against him. That leaves P1, World Drivers' Champion. I am predicting Charles Leclerc. I don't want to say it. I don't want to curse it. I'm a Ferrari fan. I'm scared to say this. I think Charles is more well-positioned to fight for the championship than Lewis, given his experience with Ferrari. He's very comfortable. I also have Charles at the top because I think the Ferrari is there. I'm scared to say that as well. I predicted them P1 in the Constructors' Championship. Fred Vasseur has done crazy things. The car is good. I'm confident enough in the strategy. I'm scared to say this, actually. I'm gonna curse it. I'm also putting Charles specifically about both of the McLaren boys, because Charles has been fighting closer to the front for longer. So has Ferrari compared to McLaren. Even though they've had their struggles, both driver and team, I think that they've been closer than the McLaren have, obviously. And so they're more experienced. I think they're more ready to go. McLaren had their year of trying to figure things out, but Ferrari has been doing that for a while. I think they were just waiting for the car to be there, and I think it is. And I think part of the agreement might be we give Charles a real go in 2025. Hopefully he wins it, and then he'll feel more comfortable stepping and putting Lewis as the focus of Ferrari in 2026. Given he's also already won a championship, and there's not as much what if. If it's not Max, which I don't think it will be, I just think Charles is the most prepared, and I think Ferrari is the most prepared. And I don't want to say that. I actually am really scared. I'm gonna curse it. I don't remember what it feels like to think somebody other than Max Verstappen could win the championship. That's all I'm going to say about that. I really need to stop talking so I don't curse it. Those are my predictions for the 2025 F1 season. We'll see how they go. I will react to these at the end of the season. Let me know your thoughts. Where do you predict? Who do you think will be championship? Who do you think will be Constructors' Championship? I'm really excited for the season. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So make sure you follow me. Subscribe. I finally set up this to be a real podcast on all podcast platforms. So please find me wherever you listen to your podcast. Follow me. Rate it 5 stars. subscribe to my YouTube channel, give it a thumbs up, comment, do all of the things, and let me know what other videos you would like me to sneak in before the season starts, because once the season starts, most of my videos will be about the races. They'll be about F1 and IndyCar races. So also if you have any IndyCar requests, happy to fulfill those for you. Thank you so much for watching and or listening, and I will catch you soon.